prayers. I will invite the Honorable Premier to say prayers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shall we pray? Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name, and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex officio members and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always.
Amen. Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Reading by the Honorable Speaker of Messages and Announcements.
Thank you. Honorable colleagues, today we begin debate on the speech from the throne and a 2-year budget. Before the debate begins, I wish to address several matters of procedure that are spelled out in our Legislative Assembly standing orders and in the rules and conventions of the orders of the House of Commons in the United Kingdom. Our standing orders protect your right to debate, but there are constraints and rules to which you must adhere. The rules must be strictly followed, no matter your opinion on the subject being debated. Debate must, and I will see to it that it is, relevant to the matters before the House. No one will be allowed to accuse or insult fellow members or the chair, not even with just one word, while standing, sitting, or speaking when called upon by the speaker. The word coward, when spoken and directed to any member, whether on the backbench, government, or opposition, is a good example. Words spoken in this house, even if not repeated in the written Hansard, can damage and hurt, particularly in our small community. Members should be aware of the protection they have when speaking because there is parliamentary privilege. But it is exactly that protection that dictates decency and truth, not speculation or heresy. It should be understood by everyone that ours is not a sovereign parliament, but a legislature with powers of representation. If a matter is not addressed in our local standing orders or our legislative assembly immunities, power, and privileges law, we must turn to the orders of the House of Commons of the United Kingdom to ensure conformity of parliamentary rules and control. Parliamentary privilege is the sum of the peculiar rights enjoyed by you as members of this honorable House, without which you could not discharge your functions. That privilege cannot and must not be abused. Members or those outside the House who disregard these rights and immunities are in breach of privileges and can be punished. This applies to the media and any other entity or person. We have the right to punish actions that obstruct or impede the Assembly in the performance of its functions and are contemptible offenses against its authority. These include disobedience to legitimate commands and libel of the House, its members or its officers, which include the clerk and the sergeant at arms. The protection that absolute privilege gives must not be abused. Reports by the media. Some people believe that it is not the duty of the media to publish accurate reports of the House, but only the accounts that suit them or catch them. No reasonable person would deny that some care must be taken by the media, lest it appears that food for gossip is being provided under legitimate guise. It is one thing to report debates of the Legislative Assembly as a matter of public interest, but it is quite another for the media to carry any irresponsible or scandalous words that may happen to fall from the lips of the members speaking in the Legislative Assembly, whether they are relevant to the matter being debated or not. Doing so helps spread scandal across the islands without consideration of the victim. In my opinion, the media should act responsibly in these matters. If a member does abuse his privileges, not for making a real contribution to the question being debated, but as a license to speak irresponsibly about someone, and especially someone who has no standing here and cannot defend themselves, the media should not add to the wrong by casting open the windows of this House and letting the world know about it. Media that regards a man's reputation so lightly as to publicize charges of dishonesty or underhanded behavior without even the slightest evidence has little to complain about if made to make a substantial payment in redress. The same principle would apply if the words were recorded and subsequently ordered to be expunged and not available for rebroadcast or as part of the written official report. It is the practice of the House to not publish scurrilous language used in debate. Members must observe standing orders, particularly rules of debate, as found on page 24 of our standing orders at the beginning of section 32, ending at section 39 on page 27. I must ask you to pay very close attention to the enforcement of orders beginning at section 40 on page 27 and ending at section 41, subsection 14 on page 29, which I will take the time to read so one and all understand what enforcement under these orders mean. Section 40 says, and I quote, "The presiding officer is responsible for the observance of the rules of order in the House and in committees of the whole House, especially when his decision upon any point of order shall not be open to appeal and shall not be reviewed by the House, save upon a substantive motion made after notice." I want to take the time to read section 41, which says, and I quote, "The presiding officer, after having called the attention of the House or of a committee to the conduct of a member who persists in irrelevance or tedious repetition, either of his own arguments or of the arguments used by the other members, may direct the member to discontinue his speech and to resume his seat. 2. The presiding officer shall order any member whose conduct is grossly disorderly to withdraw him immediately from the House during the remainder of the day's sitting, and may direct such steps to be taken as are necessary to enforce that order. 3. If a direction to withdraw under paragraph 2 is not complied with at once, or if on any occasion the presiding officer thinks that his powers under that paragraph are inadequate, he may name such member or members in the manner provided by paragraph 4 or 5. If a member shows disregard for the authority of the chair or abuses the rules of the House by persistently and willfully obstructing its business or otherwise, the presiding officer shall direct the attention of the House to the incident, mentioning by name the member concerned. The presiding officer shall then call upon a member of the government to move that the honorable member for, pointing out their respective constituencies, be suspended from the service of the House, and the presiding officer shall forthwith put the question, no seconder being required and no amendment, adjournment, or debate being allowed. The offense, if the offense has been committed in a committee of the whole House, the chairman shall forthwith suspend the proceedings of the committee, and as soon as the House has resumed, report the circumstances to the House and follow the procedure provided by paragraph 4. If a member is suspended under any provision hereof, his suspension on the first occasion in any meeting shall continue for 1 day, on the second occasion for 2 days, and on a third or subsequent occasion for the duration of that meeting and the subsequent meeting. Not more than one member shall be named at the same time unless several members present together have jointly disregarded the authority of the chair. A member who is suspended under paragraphs 4 and 6 or is directed to withdraw under paragraph 2 shall forthwith leave the House and its precincts. If any member who has been directed to withdraw or has been suspended under this standing order refuses or neglects to obey the direction of the presiding officer in that behalf, the presiding officer shall call the attention of the House to the fact that recourse to force is necessary in order to compel obedience to his direction, and that member named by him as having so refused or neglected to obey his direction shall thereupon, without further question put, be suspended from the service of the House during the remainder of the meeting, or for 10 days, whichever is the longer. If resort to force is necessary, the presiding officer may suspend the sitting during the removal of the offending member. 11, a member who is directed to withdraw or who is suspended under this standing order shall not be entitled to attend the sitting from which he was directed to withdraw, or, in case of suspension, to attend any sitting or enter the precincts of the House until the termination of his suspension. 12, on receiving from a member suspended under this standing order a written expression of regret, the presiding officer shall lay it before the House, and it shall be entered in the minutes of proceedings. On a motion being made for the discharge of the order of suspension, the question thereupon shall be decided without amendment or debate. If the question is agreed upon, the order shall be discharged and the member readmitted. 13, in the case of grave disorder arising in the House, the presiding officer may, if he thinks it necessary, adjourn the House without question put, or suspend the sitting for a time named by him. 14, nothing in the standing order shall be taken to prevent the House from proceeding against any member for any breach of order not herein specified. Use of Hansard for court proceedings. Honorable members, requests have been made to allow the use of Hansards, the official report of this legislature, in certain court cases. This is not allowed, and here are my reasons. It is precedent set down centuries ago. The House never loses its absolute privilege. There is no such thing as a waiver of parliamentary privilege. The official report, the Hansard, cannot be replaced by the court by another report. It is neither a substitute for tapes, nor are the tapes a substitute for it. The official report is sui generis and not an alternative to other documentation. The report is prepared on the definitive principles that are not arbitrary or whimsical and are set out in published literature. It cannot be altered by order of a court. It cannot be inquired into or challenged by a court. The Hansard never loses its absolute privilege. It is set down in the Commonwealth, in law and convention, that the proceedings in Parliament should not be impeached or questioned in any court, or any place for that matter, out of Parliament. This prevents proceedings in Parliament from being examined, questioned, or used to support causes. We must bear in mind the centuries-old convention that no civil or criminal proceedings may be instituted against any member in respect of spoken or written words to the House or a committee. Convention and law say no evidence in relation to debates, minutes of evidence, any document, proceedings, or examinations before the House or a committee is admissible in any proceedings before a court or to a person authorized by law to take evidence unless permission has been given by the Speaker. In the matter of the request made to me, my decision not to grant permission stands. The strength of this traditional position of the Convention is to protect the institution of Parliament, to prevent issues or conflicts with the courts, and to avoid the risk of any ill-conceived attempts to use Parliament's proceedings for wrong private purposes. It also ensures a considerable level of formality and conformity in concepts of evidence and prevents casuistically skirmishing with the Legislative Assembly. Also, it is not apparent in what circumstances audio and/or video of proceedings of the House or the committee can have probative value in court, used together with or instead of the official Hansard's report. Nor can any proper purposes be served in using audio or video to supplement or contradict the official Hansard's report, to impact any legal proceedings unless the tapes are the official Hansard report and permission has been given by the Speaker. An official report of the legislature on the release of Hansards is not prepared for use as evidence in a court of law or anywhere else, nor is it other than what it sets out to be, substantially the verbatim report, nor will it ordinarily contain everything said by every member during a sitting of the legislature. Only the member called by the chair to speak has the floor and should be recorded. The official report is evidence of what was said as reported in the Hansard. It cannot be used to prove anything else. It is useless to establish truth of its contents and is the legal record of a sitting. We do not allow the Hansard to reproduce comments from a sedentary position. A member's comments are recorded in the Hansard if he or she has been called upon to speak by the chair, or if he makes a remark that is subsequently picked up by another member and used in the debate. But a remark from the sitting position is not reproduced in the Hansard, and although it may be broadcast, it is not part of the official report. When members say things when not called upon, they are not reproduced in the Hansard. A member may request it for use in the Legislative Assembly to prove what was said because it could have been heard in broadcast and needs to be addressed. A member has that right, but the Speaker has to give consent. Relevance in debate and other behavior in the House. A member must direct his or her speech to the questions on the discussion or to a point of order. The precise relevance of an argument may not always be perceivable, but a member must speak to the matter at hand, nothing else. A member who persists in irrelevance or tedious repetition may be directed by the Speaker to discontinue his speech and resume his seat. Conversations by members near each other, and I'll repeat that, conversations by members near each other must be done in a whisper tone. The chamber is a very confined area, and loud voices do distract the members speaking and members who want to speak to hear. When the House is sitting and a member wishes to enter the chamber, they should bow to the chair. On taking their seat, they should again bow to the chair. If a member wishes to leave their seat, they should bow to the chair, and if they wish to exit the chamber, they should bow to the chair. Procedure when the Speaker rises. Whenever the Speaker rises, there must be silence, and any member who is speaking or offering to speak should immediately sit down. Members should not leave their seats while the Speaker is addressing the House. They should not leave their seats while the Governor is addressing the House on the throne speech. If a member persists in standing after the Speaker has risen and refuses to resume his seat when directed by the Speaker to do so, he must withstand the order of suspension or can be named. I direct your attention to the Erskine May 24th edition for your knowledge of the orders that will be directed against misconduct. Matters in committee. Committees and witnesses of committees may be subject to Sections 9 and 12 of the Legislative Assembly Immunities, Powers, and Privileges Law, and can order any person to attend the committee to give evidence or produce documents in their possession or control. Section 6 of the Immunities, Powers, and Privileges Law specifically says, 6.1 says, in reference to witnesses being notified by summons, any order to attend, give evidence, or produce documents before the Assembly or a committee shall be notified to the person required to attend or produce documents by a summons under the hand of the clerk issued by the direction of the Speaker. Section 8.1 and 2 of the law states, and I quote, 8.1, where any person ordered to attend, give evidence, or produce any paper, book, record, or document before the assembly refuses to answer any question put to him or to produce any such paper, book, record, or document on the ground that the same is of a private nature and does not affect the subject of inquiry, the chairman of the committee may report such refusal to the speaker with the reasons thereof, and the speaker may thereupon excuse the answering of such questions or the production of such paper, book, record, or document, or order the answering or production thereof. 8.2. Whereas any person ordered to attend, give evidence, or produce any paper, book, record, or document before any committee refuses to answer any question put to him or to produce any such paper, book, record, or document on the ground that the same is of a private nature and does not affect the subject of inquiry, the chairman of the committee may report such refusal to the speaker with the reasons therefor, and the speaker may thereupon excuse the answering of such question or the production of such paper, book, record, or document, or order the answering or production thereof. Section 9, 1 and 2 of the law says, and I quote, 9.1, every person summoned to attend, give evidence, or produce any paper, book, record, or document before the assembly or a committee is entitled, in respect of such evidence, the disclosure of any communication or the production of any such paper, book, record, or document to the same rights or privileges as before the Grand Court. 9.2, except with the consent of the governor, no public officer shall, A, produce before the assembly or a committee any such paper, book, record, or document, or B, give before the assembly or a committee evidence on any such matter as it relates to or forms part of the correspondence of any civil department or unit or to any matter affecting the public service. End of quote. All matters of the House, all committees of the House are creatures of the House. They are responsible to the House, must report to the House, and abide and operate by powers and rules given by the House. The Honorable Speaker is the arbiter of the rules. The House is the final jurisdiction of the conventions and orders as passed down through ages and centuries to Parliament, and in our regards, the Legislative Assembly. No committee can operate outside of these rules. If it does, the Speaker must exert his powers. The final arbiter of the rules is the House, which deems its powers of order to the Honorable Speaker. So, to make it clear, the chair of any committee, select or standing, gets its operative works and its authority from the seat of authority, the House, and thus the Honorable Speaker. I have observed, and there is concern, that the Public Accounts Committee, PAC, has tried to exert powers to go into areas that cannot be sustained in the parliamentary makeup such as we have and as I have outlined. The PAC is set up to look at and examine cases and claims to ensure that expenditure deliver value for money. The PAC cannot delve into areas of operational responsibilities of the civil service. Where a unit, department, or other areas of government specifically spends funds to and for the benefit of the public, the PAC must see if value for money is achieved, and by what means. That is not to say, and in the strongest of any sense of any meaning of good governance, that the PAC can take on responsibilities of, for example, the operatives of the public services, like employment. That is not the remit of the PAC, as there are other avenues that members can question matters of employment if they feel the need to do so, And if the members of that committee, which gains its powers from the Honorable Assembly, goes on such excursions, it will have to be brought back to its seat of its responsibilities. That is, if money is spent and was not done in the best possible way. Nothing else. As Speaker of this Honorable Assembly, I am responsible and I will ensure the conventions and rules of parliamentary democracy are abided by each and every committee of this Honorable House. This is my ruling on those matters I have spoken to. Copies will be distributed to members and the press. Thank you.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports. Cayman Islands Monetary Authority Annual Report 2016 to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs.
The Honorable Minister of Financial Services and Home Affairs, member for constituents of West Bay South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I raise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the 2015-2016 Annual Report and the related audited financial statements of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority for the financial year ended June 30th, 2016.
So ordered. Does the member want to speak thereto?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, components of the annual report are as follows. The annual report just tabled for the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority is comprised of 3 sections: an industry overview, organizational developments, and Sema's audited financial statements as of 30th of June 2016. Mr. Speaker, dealing first with the financial performance of Sema. Sema's net income for the 2015-2016 financial year was $0.708 million, which was allocated to Sema's capital expenditure reserves and general reserves. Total assets as of 30th of June 2016 were $139.5 million. This amount includes currency reserves assets of $118 million. Total liabilities as of 30th of June 2016 equaled $111.281 million. Total reserves were $25.893 million, while contributed capital remained at $2.328 million. Mr. Speaker, Sema collected $104.839 million in fees from regulated entities on behalf of the Cayman Islands government for the 2015-16 financial year, compared to $102.667 million for the prior year. Currency in circulation as of June 30th, 2016 was $106.9 million. This represents a 12.6% increase from the 30th June 2015 figure of $94.9 million. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General issued an unqualified opinion on the financial position of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority as of 30th June 2016. Mr. Speaker, turning now to an overview of industry performance, efforts continued during the financial year 2015-2016 to strengthen and enhance the regulatory framework governing the financial services industry of the Cayman Islands. Dealing with captive insurance, despite the slight drop in the number of insurance-related licensees from 873 at the end of the 2014-15 fiscal year to 862 at the end of 2015-16 fiscal year, the Cayman Islands remains the second largest domicile for captive insurance companies, and the jurisdiction is the number 1 domicile for healthcare captives, with 33% of Cayman's captives covering healthcare risks. Mr. Speaker, the reduction in the number of licensees was a result of Sema carrying out a tidying up exercise to cancel previously surrendered license, with surrenders reaching as far back as 2011. The number of insurance companies stood at 709 at 30th June 2016, and the premiums generated equaled US $13.5 billion. The assets held totaled US $57.9 billion. Mr. Speaker, the funds industry remains healthy, with 11,019 total funds as of 30th of June 2016, compared to 11,061 at 30th June 2015. The total funds at June 2016 included 2,882 master funds, 7,661 registered funds, 376 administered funds, and 100 licensed funds, as the Cayman Islands continues to be the jurisdiction of choice for the global hedge fund industry. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands also remained a leading jurisdiction from which trust and company management services are provided. There are 130 trust companies licensed at 30th June 2016. Trust companies restricted license number 62, and nominee trust license are in the number of 55. Control subsidiaries registered are 46, and there are a total of 121 private trust companies as of June 2016. Mr. Speaker, there were 176 licensed banks by June 2016. Total international assets as of June 2016 stood at $1.156 trillion and liabilities at $1.202 trillion. Domestic assets were $22.98 billion and liabilities were $56.92 billion. As at June 2016, the jurisdiction ranked 8th internationally in terms of external cross-border assets of $1.13 trillion and 5th by external cross-border liabilities of $1.14 trillion booked from the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, in relation to organizational developments, I would like to highlight that significant work has been undertaken. Throughout the reporting period, Sema continued active involvement and influence in several international regulatory bodies. These include the International Association of Insurance Supervisors and the Group of Financial Center Supervisors. Since 2013, Sema contributes to the work of the Financial Stability Board Regional Consultative Group for the Americas. Sema is actively involved with the work of the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force in preparation for the upcoming financial assessment, which is set for December 2017. In addition, Sema has also enhanced its risk assessment of licensees using the Risk Enterprise Management approach, which considers risk recognition, risk evaluation, risk analysis, and risk assessment. Sema also represents a jurisdiction on other organizations such as the International Organization of Securities Commission, the Caribbean Association of Insurance Regulators, the Caribbean Group of Banking Supervisors, the Association of Supervisors of Banks of America, the Group of International Insurance Center Supervisors, the Caribbean Group of Securities Regulators, and the Offshore Group of Collective Investment Scheme Supervisors. Mr. Speaker, Sema's Information Technology Department has continued to improve efficiency in regard to conducting business with Sema. A new web-based portal known as the Regulatory Enhanced Electronic Form Submission system was launched in January 2015 to facilitate new applications for prospective licensed entities and change requests for existing licensees, and to submit mandatory financial returns. And Mr. Speaker, since the introduction of the Regulatory Enhanced Electronic Form Submission system, Sema has seen significant improvement of its services. Mr. Speaker, the report also highlights Sema's continued effort in monitoring the impact of the Alternative Investment Fund Managers Directive, commonly known as AIFMD, on the Cayman Islands funds and securities industry. Sema, in consultation with the Cayman Islands government and industry stakeholders, amended the Mutual Funds Law 2015 and the Securities Investment Business Law for the purpose of the AIFMD. Regulations were also drafted to supplement both the Mutual Funds Law and the Securities Investment Business Law in respect of AIFMD. Mr. Speaker, during this period, Sema signed 3 bilateral MOUs between the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission, the Abu Dhabi Global Market FRSA, and the Labuan Financial Services Authority. It initiated 11 formal enforcement actions, and it handled a total of 246 requests for assistance from overseas regulatory authorities. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I have attempted to provide a summary of Sema's annual report and highlight several key points. Sema plays a critical role in our financial services industry and is committed to playing its part in contributing to the continued success of our jurisdiction. And so, Mr. Speaker, I present this report to this honourable House and encourage members to read it accordingly.
The Immigration Grant of the Right to be Caymanian, number 1, Order 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
The Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of this honorable House the Immigration Grant of the Right to be Caymanian, number 1, Order 2017.
So ordered. Does the Premier wish to speak thereto?
No, Mr. Speaker, with respect to this and the 2 to follow, there will be substantive motions, and I will speak at some length to them when I move those motions sometime hence.
Thank you.
The Immigration Grant of the Right to be Caymanian, number 2, Order 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this honorable House the Immigration Grant of the Right to be Caymanian, number 2, Order 2017.
So ordered.
The Immigration Grant of the Right to be Caymanian, number 3, Order 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this honorable House the Immigration Grant of the Right to be Caymanian, number 3, Order 2017.
So ordered.
The report of the Standing Business Committee, first meeting of the 2017-2018 session of the Legislative Assembly, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Premier, Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to lay on the table of this honorable House the report of the Standing Business Committee of the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands for the first meeting of the 2017-2018 session of the Legislative Assembly.
So ordered.
Statements by the Honourable Members and Ministers of the Cabinet.
None.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
Honorable members, notable Caymanian, Frank E. Rolston Jr. has passed away, and we offer our condolences and respect to his widow and his family. Frank E. Rolston Jr. first arrived in Cayman from Tampa, Florida in 1955 for a 2-week vacation to visit his parents. He met Caymanian beauty Elizabeth Beth McTaggart on that trip, and he knew then Cayman would be his home for good. Mr. Frank's parents ran the Seaview Hotel, and during the early 1950s, the U.S. government wanted to establish weather stations throughout the Caribbean to assist in tracking storms that might ultimately threaten the United States. Cayman was strategically located, being closest to the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. It would essentially have the last word for Miami before storms moved up into the Gulf of Mexico or Atlantic coast. Some of the early weathermen in Cayman were staff of the United States government who stayed at the Seaview Hotel on short rotations. It was those weathermen who convinced Mr. Frank that he should consider taking over the weather operations on a full-time basis. Mr. Frank returned to Tampa, Florida to complete his education, then returned to Cayman to work at the Weather Bureau, training under the Americans who had established the station. He took over the permanent position of meteorologist in 1963. During these early years, Caymanian men were still earning their livelihoods at sea. And so Mr. Frank had the enviable position of having only women to help him staff the Weather Bureau. These brilliant, hardworking Caymanian women were Mrs. Florist, that is Polly Thompson, Mrs. Alice Anderson, Ms. Lily Mae Bodden, Mrs. Katie E. Banks, Mrs. Helen Hislop, Mrs. Gilda Panton, and Mrs. Sharon E. Banks. These ladies and Mr. Frank were a dedicated, hard-working team. Their daily routine, which became round the clock as storms approached, included multiple daily balloon launches for tracking upper air conditions, coupled with equipment on the ground, including the big radar in the famous White Dome at Owen Roberts. These allowed Mr. Frank to relay local weather conditions to the National Weather Service in Miami, to aircraft using Cayman's airspace, and generally to anyone in Cayman who had an interest in weather conditions, usually fishermen and dive operators. In 1976, the Cayman Islands government, recognizing its own need to have full-time weather operations, jointly with the U.S. government, formed the Cooperative Upper Air Station. Mr. Frank became its first Chief Met Officer. When Radio Cayman became operational that same year, Frank provided daily forecasts and tide tables to a much wider, grateful Cayman public. Fondly known as the Weatherman, Mr. Frank faithfully carried out his duties to the United States and Cayman Islands for almost 30 years. He passed away at his home on Bogasan Road, West Bay, on Thursday morning, October 26th, at the age of 85. Mr. Frank was a devoted public servant, as well as a friend to so many people in this community. I do recall, because of my family connection with Swan Islands, that he had a huge connection with those people who ran and were caretakers of Swan Island. And so he made a lot of friends in West Bay, which largely populated and ran that island for the U.S. government. I do recall, too, that my stepfather, who was one of the North Sound boat operators, had a lot of connection. Him and his brother, who, by the way, is the grandfather of the Minister of Financial Services, they knew them quite well because his mother was staunch tourism operator in this country. And those two hotels, Sunset House and Seaview Hotel, they took care, those people took care of those operators. And so Mr. Frank came to West Bay for last many years to live. He was always very respectful to me. May his soul rest in peace. Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I had prepared a similar obituary of Mr. Frank, but as you've covered all of those, I won't rehearse them. I will just speak very briefly about some of my personal recollections. Obviously, growing up in Georgetown, particularly in South Sound and Crew Road, I'm going to Emsley Memorial Church. I've known Mr. Frank Rolston and his dear wife Beth and the children, Shirley, Sharon, and Frank, all my life. And growing up as a boy in Crew Road, Frankie, as we called him, went to Triple C with one of my dearest boyhood friends, William Ebanks, and so we thought we had special access really to things that were exciting and scientific and in terms of the weather station. And on occasion we'd get a chance to go up there, but I think for us the most important bit was that because we were killers of birds and everything that moved, using slingshots in particular. And one of my memories that will always be with me is we found out that the rubber band or whatever it was that they put around these balloons was very, very strong rubber. And so Frankie was a constant source of the rubber so that we could make slingshots. But Mr. Rolston did provide an extraordinary service to these islands at a time when very few people had this level of meteorological knowledge. And when, as you pointed out, in the early days, most of the men were away at sea. And he carried on that task with a great deal of enthusiasm and expertise for a very long time. And these islands certainly owe him a debt of gratitude. He was also very much an individual who cared about particularly those who were less fortunate in the community. And I remember him organizing parties for what was then called underprivileged children. He was a member of the Rotary Club for a long time and provided a great deal of humanitarian service to the people of these islands. He raised three wonderful, with his wife, Ms. Beth, wonderful children, and was a stalwart of this community. And I know I speak on behalf of the members of the government when I say that we mourn his loss and we offer our condolences to his family. They may rest assured that their father was one of the true nation builders of these Cayman Islands. Thank you, sir.
Minister of Financial Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank both you and the Premier for giving the recognition to Mr. Frank that is so well deserved in this honourable House for his contributions to this country. And obviously not to repeat all that was said about his particular contributions, but just to lend brief words of condolences to the family, whom I know very well, and certainly as a representative for West Bay South, Mr. Frank and Miss Beth are longtime residents, as you've pointed out, and so I certainly offer the deepest condolences as the representative to Miss Beth, Shirley, Sharon, and Frankie. And as you pointed out, Mr. Speaker, certainly my own family was impacted as yours were or was as it relates to the involvement in the tourism industry and Mr. Frank's family in helping to ensure that, as my grandmother so often put it, sometime with ire, my grandfather was always out on that boat, of which became the namesake of the boat in the end. But certainly, it is with deep regret that I do offer these condolences to the entire family. And I just like that to be recorded and to also show my appreciation for all that he has done and all that the family continues to do for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member wishing to speak? Honorable Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And as head of the civil service, I would also like to join yourself, the Premier and the Minister for Financial Services in expressing our grateful thanks to Mr. Rolston for all that he had done for us in the civil service and the country. We all remember him. I had the great pleasure of working with his daughter Sharon at the Immigration Department for many, many years. She spoke so highly of her dad, very, very close family, close Caymanian family. So on behalf of all of us in the civil service, we want to express our sincere condolences to the family and ask God's blessings on them. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wishing to speak? If not, before we do that, I think we should stand now in a minute of silence of respect, noting as we do that there are other notable Caymanians in mourning today because of family members who have passed away. A minute of respect. Thank you. The clerk will forward these remarks of condolences to the family of Mr. Frank E. Rolston, Jr. Also, I would like to notify the House that Mr. Gold was seriously ill, and we want to wish him well. He is in the hospital, I think, at Sherry's, and we should remember him in our prayers.
Raising a matter of privileges,
None.
government business, bills, the appropriation, financial years 2018 and 2019, bill 2017.
The appropriation financial years 2018 and 19, bill 2017. Does any member wish to speak? The honorable member from North Side and the leader of the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier launched his policy statement recounting the historical events of the day. And while I agree with him that those events he mentioned were positive, history-making events. The more troubling historical event of the day was the Speaker giving thanks to the Governor for her throne speech. These are the kinds of changes that only serve to give members of this Legislative Assembly pause. And I invite this House to consider reestablishing the convention that the vote of thanks comes from a member on the floor. The government has labeled the policy statement with the title Stability, Empathy, Prosperity, a plan for sustainable social and economic development. And the budget address carries the title Maintaining Physical.
Will the member take a seat? Am I hearing correctly in the vote of thanks to Her Excellency the Governor? And the complaint is that it was not made correctly?
Mr. Speaker, I don't recall making a complaint. I recall making an observation.
Observation which has been recorded. If it's the one, to honorable members for your clarity, if it is the vote of thanks that was given by me as Speaker that is being mentioned, then you need to understand that the vote of thanks by convention and precedent is given by the Father of the House. Whether I'm Speaker or not, I am the longest serving member of this Honorable Assembly, and therefore carry that known title as Father of the House. I gave the thanks on that basis. It's left up to any other member if they also want to give thanks or not. But as laid down by rules and convention, precedent, the Father of the House is responsible to give the vote of thanks to Her Majesty's representative if Her Majesty is not here in person. That's the rule. Honorable member from the North Side.
The title placed on the budget address was Maintaining Fiscal Prudence and Inducement to Growth. Lots of fancy words here, but no matter how they dress it up, this is a budget that is simply not good for the average Caymanian. It is nothing more than a continuation of the regressive policies of the progressives, as the Premier admits and boasts, by this National Unity Coalition government. Policies that cater to a particular class of Caymanians, the foreign businesses, the foreign worker, which will lead to the continued erosion of the middle class and the increased suffering and hopelessness of the poor Caymanians. It is very likely, also historic as well, that at the very moment the Premier was making his policy statement in this House, members were being informed by text message that an armed robbery was taking place in broad daylight, not likely to be seen as a sign of prosperity for Caymanians. The opposition intends to support those things in the budget that, as the people's representatives, we believe are good for Caymanians. We intend to put forward constructive alternatives that offer not empathy, but action for Caymanians. we have chosen as our theme, building a better future by learning from our past through a return to our founding principles. We, the shadow government, will offer 5 contributions to this debate. It was Mahatma Gandhi who wrote about the 7 dangers of human virtues, namely, 1, wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, business without ethics, science without humanity, religion without sacrifice, politics without principle. Our forefathers managed these dangers as they built Cayman's economic miracle, and we, the elected members of this honorable House, would need to pay special attention and deliberate attention to number 7, politics without principles. As elected members, we should be encouraging, demanding, and demonstrating work, conscience, character, ethics, humanity, sacrifice, and principles, while combining all these with good old-fashioned Caymanian common sense, ingenuity, and entrepreneurship. We intend to offer constructive alternative uses of the revenue that the government projects to collect. That is the $730.7 million in 1918 and the $722.8 million as stated in the budget documents. For example, when we suggest that resources should be increased in a particular area like education, we will recommend equal reductions in other areas. The budget figures in the plan and estimates document rarely support and often contradict the promises and assertions made in the throne speech, policy statement, and the budget address. Common to all 3 speeches is the Government of National Unity's assertion and promise that education is the number 1 priority. Here are the facts from the budget document, and specifically the plan and estimates. Page 139, line item EGA 6, Secondary Education Services, in 2018 gets $23,555,030, which represents a 2% reduction below the 2017 allocation annualized. In 2019, the $23,768,793 budget is still $375,134 below the budget allocation for 2017. In the primary schools allocation, we find the same thing. Pages 137 and 138, line item EG5. We find only a minuscule increase, $21,560,868, representing only a 2% increase above the 2017 budget. Hardly enough to increase teachers' salaries to at least $5,000 each per month, which the opposition wholeheartedly endorses and supports. We trust that this will not be another promise, proclamation, and public announcement not kept. These reductions are even more profound on pages 143 in EG 8, facilities, maintenance, and operating school support services, where the amount budgeted for 2018 is reduced by $1,110,742 below the 2017 annualized forecast. All the schools need more maintenance, not less. Contrast this with the massive, enormous, gigantic, and walloping increase in the budget for 2018 on page 179, FSC 34, Prison Custodial Services, of $11,390,803. That is $6,271,058 more than the 2017 forecast of $5,119,745. More than 100% increase for prisoners, most of whom were failed by the very education system we are continuing to underfund. Follow the money in the budget to determine the real priorities. The Premier, in his address, speaks to the devolution of authority to principals that the new education law offers, but the budgeted figures demonstrate otherwise. We in the opposition fully support the devolution of authority to principals. We were the ones who amended the education law presented to enhance and allow the devolution of such authority. While the budget proposes to reduce the funding to high schools and marginally increase the funding to primary schools, they are in fact increasing the funding to the already overbearing, top-heavy, inefficient, and ineffective administration by a whopping 15%. Pages 134 and 135 of the plan and estimates, line item EGA1, policy advice, governance, and ministerial support services, show for 2018 $6,103,744, an increase of $804,244 over the $5,299,500 allocated for the 2017 budget. This is hardly a demonstration that the devolution to the schools is being facilitated. I will return to the portfolio of education later in my contribution when I deal more specifically with my shadow minister's responsibilities of education and health. This is only one example, but there are many instances in these budget documents where the figures we are being asked to approve under the appropriation law do not support the promises and claims in the 3 speeches delivered here last Friday. Suffice it to say that many more will be demonstrated by members of the opposition when they make their contributions to this debate in relation to the shadow ministerial responsibilities. The Premier.
Honorable Member, you keep referring to a shadow government, and I know what you want, what you desire, but there is no such thing in this assembly as a shadow government. Not formally shadow ministers, as those are constitutional makeup and party politics makeup. And I don't see any party member on that side, on your side of the House. What I know is members as you are, a member from North Side, independent, member from Savannah, independent. Member for Newlands, independent. Member from East End, independent. Member from Bordentown West, independent. And member from Georgetown Central, independent. There's no party. There is no constitutional recognition in our rules nor constitution or standing orders for shadow government makeup, as you are saying. We shall not refer to them as shadow ministers. Thank you. You may continue your speech, sir.
Mr. Speaker, I don't recall identifying anybody in my speech as a shadow minister. I said we had their shadow ministerial responsibilities. Two different things. But, Mr. Speaker, we know how we often depart from conventions and ancient practices as we live our lives. The Premier, Minister of Finance and Economic Development, and Her Excellency the Governor all lay claims and boast of the financial prudence of this government in this budget. But is it really prudent to deny Caymanian children in the public school system resources that are badly needed to enhance their opportunities to be the best they can be, while boasting a net surplus of $141 million and giving children in the private schools $1 million? Certainly, it would seem more prudent to reduce the surplus by $10 million to hire the badly needed teachers, to support teachers, to pay teachers more, and to provide the consumable resources needed to enable better and greater achievements in education. This action, not empathy, will improve educational opportunities and allow Caymanians to get better jobs with higher incomes that will lead to better lives for Caymanians. Not all Caymanians have a unique ability to operate like a laptop computer and change the hard drive to remove all memory of past actions. The $141 million this government claims as a surplus is an operational surplus produced by subtracting the recurrent costs from the revenue. In 2018, the figures are revenue, $730.7 million. Operating expense, $644.1 million. Operating surplus, $86.6 million, which has to be reduced by the subsidy to public authorities and SAGS of $19.6 million, which should leave a surplus of $67 million. Then we have to subtract the debt servicing of $30.3 million, which is $36.7 million left in that surplus account. Then we are spending capital from the operational revenue, $74.2 million, which places the country in a deficit of $37.5 million. There is no surplus from which to fund education, but we could use the money from the cruise berthing and the $1 million for private schools and some from the subsidy to the public authorities and SAGS. The government also makes the claim and places great confidence that there are no new taxes or increased fees in these two one-year budgets. The public will recall that they made the same claim in the last 4 budgets. Yet a police record went from $10 to $25. And the new requirements of the business licensing regime drastically increased the costs associated with applying and obtaining a business license. The new builder's law introduced additional license fees that added to the cost of being a contractor, and therefore the cost for Caymanians to hire contractors. These increases and others all contributed to increases in the cost of living for average Caymanians. The opposition cannot support the cruise port developments while education is being denied the support and funding that it needs. Time to sink the dock and float education so all children can benefit from the rising tide. The cruise ship port development is going to consume large portions of the port revenue that now helps to fund the cargo operation for at least the next 50 years. We in the opposition say secret port development because we have, on at least 3 occasions, verbally and at least once in writing, requested a presentation on the details of the project over the last 6 months, and none has been forthcoming. We are left to wonder what is being covered up. In the absence of facts from the government as to the design, cost, and funding, here is what the EIU has dredged up, researched, or had left on my truck windshield. Design: 2 piers in deeper water, less dredging, but greater construction costs. Cargo area increased by 7 acres. Costs, $300 million plus. Funding, cruise industry, somewhere between 50 and 100 million. Port income, all fees related to cruise passengers to the cruise industry for 50 years for their injection of between 50 and 100 million in capital into the project. Government guarantee, none. Question: who is providing the other funds or guarantee to other financiers to build the cruise berthing facility? Is this going to be another NRA deal for DART? Secret: the various business cases done by consultants. The opposition is of the view that the diversion of all cruise-related income from the port, the additional cargo handling equipment, and the cost of handling larger cargo ships will lead to increases in port handling charges, and therefore an increase in the cost of living for Caymanian consumers, and not a reduction as pontificated by the Premier and his government in this budget. The 5 million plus new cream will be paid for by Caymanians as increased cost of goods we buy in the supermarket and hardware stores. The current shipping companies are providing twice weekly cargo service, and the amount of cargo they handle does not require them to use bigger ships. The twice weekly service guarantees fresh produce and quick service. Larger ships coming twice or once per month will mean perishables will have to be delivered by air freight at higher costs to the consumers and delays in shipping of other products. The Premier says that preliminary design and cost estimates for the cruise berthing facility are complete, and bid documents are being finalized, with the next procurement stage this month, November 2017. How is this possible if design is not complete and we want to have preliminary stuff, and the Caymanian public has not seen what is being built? The pipe dream of the Port Authority, that Georgetown could be a transshipment port for perishable goods from Central America, is not going to happen. I asked the minister responsible for the Port Authority to name such shipping companies and give us the projected cargo, its source, and estimated income to the port is likely to get from such a transshipment facility to defer the cost of the $300 million plus construction. Is this part of the grand scheme of the Port Authority that justifies going from 2 deputy directors to 5? And one wonders, where is the application of the Public Authorities Law? The opposition is of the view that money in the budget allocated to expansion of the cargo facility and cruise berthing facility would be better used to build a new primary school in Bordentown, Savannah area, and to complete John Gray High School within this budget cycle. The government of national unity is made up of all the single-member electoral districts that make up the catchment area for John Gray High School. Yet, they expect the parents in their constituencies to accept that they would rather build an unnecessary, unjustified, and unknown port at the cost of more than 6 times what the new John Gray High School would cost, while their children and their teachers possibly suffer great health risk in mold-infested classrooms. The opposition is very concerned that a specific conglomerate, some kind of consortium with other local vendors, has won the bid for the proposed solid waste management system. We hope that the minister responsible can shed some light on how this bidding process was handled and give an account of what transpired that will give the people some faith and assurances that the procurement process as established in law was followed. There are other reports of possible involvement in this scheme by the same conglomerate with government. The behind-the-scenes funding for the cruise berthing facility, the refinancing of half of the bullet bond, the acquiring by Cayman Airways of the 4 737-800 MAX jets, and we know they already control the majority of our tourist accommodations and therefore the whole tourist industry. We believe, and we will try to demonstrate through our contributions to the debate, that the budget is a good one if you are amongst a certain group of Caymanians, you are owners of big business, if you are an inward investor. There is very little in this budget if you are a poor Caymanian, or a sick Caymanian, or an unemployed Caymanian, or an underemployed Caymanian. In short, there is not much here for the average Caymanian. The numbers in the budget documents do not match what the Premier, the Governor, or the Minister of Finance claim in their speeches. For instance, they claim that the economy generated by this budget will create 1,790 jobs through the provisions in this budget, and that may be so, and that would be a good thing if it happened. However, the figures in the budget also say they intend to increase work permit revenue from 66.4 million in 2017 to 70.7 million and 72.5 million in 2018 and 2019. And following along on their declaration that no fees are going to be introduced, there is only one way to achieve more revenue from work permit fees, and that is to increase the number of work permits issued. If we took the current number of work permits and divided the income produced in 2017, we could come up with an average of about $2,656 per permit. And I know that there are permits that cost less, but that even makes my argument stronger. Because if there are permits, if the majority of the permits that the government intends to increase is below that figure, the numbers must increase. We will find that over the 2-year period, 2018 to 2019, the government intends to increase work permits by 2,447 to collect the additional revenue of 4.3 million. In other words, the government boasts of creating 1,790 jobs for Caymanians, but are budgeting to allow 2,447 additional work permits. What that means is that 657 Caymanians currently employed will lose their jobs to work permit holders so government can collect the revenue. Because if you're only creating so many jobs, you're not reducing any of the revenue from permit, therefore you're not reducing the numbers of persons. If you're increasing revenue and you're adding people, that's what's going to happen. And we know that that has been the norm here for several years. There are no allowances for the hundreds of high school graduates to be employed, or for Caymanians graduating from college during the budget cycle to get employed. The government plans to increase work permits to get more revenue, not job opportunities, for Caymanians according to the numbers in this budget.
From Georgetown Central, are you rising on a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. recalling your speech to the House earlier in respect to, giving the respect to those who are standing and speaking, you highlighted about interruptions. And I respectfully just recall the Premier speaking over the Honorable Opposition Speaker when he's presenting. Now, if this point of order that you gave everybody is going to be pointed to this side, it's going to be pointed to that side. And I wish that the Honorable Premier would give the respect to the opposition leader to allow him to do his presentation. And if he wants to speak, he can speak after when it's his turn.
Honorable Member, I'll give some leeway to the fact that you are a young member in the House. And when disruptions are so that I know it's hindering people from hearing, hindering the speaker from speaking, then I am duty bound to take note of it. I didn't hear any such at this point in time. So if your piece is for informational purposes, while it was not appropriate at the point, I'll take it. But, Honorable, unless you have a point of order, then we'll have to move on to the debate. The member from Newlands,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
do you have a point of order?
I would also like to rise on the same concern that my...
Honorable Member, you all are being facetious. Sit down, no more.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe we're being facetious.
At this point, sit down, because I'm not going to tolerate it. There was no such discussion where the member was interrupted and our members could not understand what the member speaking was saying. There was no such interruption. There was none. And if you all want to take peace out of somebody, wait until your time and see if you have the right, bearing what I said in mind.
Mr. Speaker.
Unless you are rising on a point of order, then I shall say you have to take a seat. Do you have a point of order?
Mr. Speaker, just a point of clarity in respect to why I stand. Am I allowed the privilege to clarify?
No, at this point in time, we pass that. Honorable Member from Northside.
To this end, increasing revenue from work permit fees, the creation of the National Human Resource Department will be an exercise in futility and only add to the frustrations of Caymanians looking for employment. Until this government of national unity is prepared to deal with a reduction in the number of work permits and the corresponding reduction in revenue, Caymanians will continue to be unemployed. The National Human Resource Department may flap a lot of wings, but they won't be any birds flying. The Premier declared in his policy statement that his government is, and I quote, not prepared to needlessly penalize those from overseas who want to come to work here alongside us and help us to shore up our economic strength. We are prepared to make sure our immigration and work permit system is efficient, fair, and transparent. Those with a contribution to make to our economy and to our society are welcomed here, but skilled, qualified Caymanians must be provided that same opportunity. End of quotation. Clearly, the government places the work permit applicants before Caymanians. The immediate question on such a declaration is, what about the unskilled and unqualified Caymanians? The government continues to promote its policies that allow population growth by the granting of Cayman status and permanent residences to outnumber births by Caymanians. So each year, the percentage of generational Caymanians become less and less. This means that the influence of new Caymanians over the economic and political forces that govern this country becomes stronger each year. The opposition believes this trend needs to stop, and that one way of stopping this is by a review of the immigration law to reduce the grant of Caymanian status to only two methods: marriage and descent of Caymanians. If I live to be as old as my father, 85 years old, this country will have doubled its population 4 times in my lifetime, given the current demands for population growth by the business community. No country on God's green earth can sustain that kind of population growth, specifically when the majority of such population growth is by immigration. We are going to wind up like the North American Red Indian. And I proffer that the National Trust has already bought the land in the Northside constituency to put Caymanians on the reservation. The opposition is very concerned and troubled that in the 3 speeches delivered here on Friday, there is a total absence, a total omission by the government of any reference to the mortgage crisis faced by far too many Caymanians. There's not a single word, not a line, not a paragraph, not a page in the 3 speeches, nor is there any money allocated to this mortgage crisis and the fact that hundreds of Caymanians are losing their homes annually. The government, in the plan and estimates document on page 7, established 8 broad outcomes. And on pages 8 to 13, lists 63 specific outcomes and key policy strategies, with not a single mention of the mortgage crisis or any strategy to help Caymanians save their homes. The plan and estimates on page 36 to 31 also detail some 89 laws to be amended or enacted. Yet there is no reference to amending the banking laws or the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority law, nor any plans to enact a proper mortgage law to protect Caymanians. There are not any plans to enable the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority or to amend the banking laws to protect Caymanians, and in particular, senior Caymanians on single income, from being abused by the banks' unilaterally actions to introduce charges that reduce their income, like $5 to cash their government check. I had a constituent member report to me this morning that they received a check from the court for $25 for the maintenance of a child, and the bank took $5 out of the $25 to cash the check. But we don't care. The government is either in complete denial or ignoring the cries of Caymanians, or they have been successfully lobbied by the banks to do nothing to help our suffering Caymanians. Once again, the budget does not offer assistance for the average Caymanian. the mortgage crisis could lead to a serious homeless problem, and there is no funds in the budget to assist homeless Caymanians in a meaningful way. And I'll deal with what's in the budget for housing for Caymanians later on. Let me now begin to address the area of education, for which I have assumed responsibility. I didn't say that word. The opposition members took the time to visit all the government primary schools and the 2 high schools on Grand Cayman. Let me take the time, on behalf of the opposition, to most sincerely thank the principals of the schools for making the necessary arrangements to accommodate our visit. This was a very valuable and pleasant experience, and we learned so much about our education system that we are committed to doing it once a term. Here is what we found. On the positive side, the students were engaging, enthusiastic, and demonstrated a quest for learning. 2, the students were well behaved, respectful, and disciplined. All the schools demonstrated and exhibited a respect and reverence for our Christian heritage. The teachers were hardworking, enthusiastic, and commanded the respect and attention of their students. On the negative side, here's what we found. All the schools needed more human resources, more teachers, more assistant teachers, more support staff, more specialized staff, especially staff to deal with special education needs, teachers. All the schools needed more space, additional classrooms, special purpose rooms, assembly halls, staff room for teachers, etc., etc., etc. All the schools needed more consumable supplies and teaching aids. How is it possible that in a country with $700+ budgeted in revenue, and a school term that starts first week in September or last week in August, in October, teachers are having to take money from their own pockets to pay for photocopying paper? The schools all need more and better maintenance on the buildings and equipment. The principals want more autonomy and authority over their schools, staff, and budgets. They believe they know what is best for the children that they have in their care. And it should not be dictated by some remote administrative authority that rarely visits or communicates. The schools need more resources to manage their special education needs. Children. And they need these resources to be located within their schools, not only on certain days or for certain periods of the day. The children don't become special needs children at 10 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock, they're normal children. They do not become special needs children only on Wednesday or Friday. And it shouldn't take months when resources are requested for those resources to be made available. Many of these special needs children, a few weeks, a few months lost without proper diagnosis and assessment is very difficult to recover, if not impossible. Teachers and managers within the high schools want to do more technical education within their schools and to start technical education in grade 9. We in the opposition believe we should be training more technical people. The high schools have some facilities, limited though they may be. But when the government doesn't provide them with electrical wire or an outlet box to teach somebody to be an electrician, or trade a needle and cloth and buttons to teach somebody how to sew on a button, it's rather difficult for the professionals on the ground to do something about it. We believe that we could graduate students from both our high schools now as electrical wiremen, which is the first level to do electrical installation work. We could graduate them from high school as journeyman plumber, which is the first level of plumbing. We believe we could graduate them as number 3 carpenters. We believe we could graduate them as level 1 auto mechanics. But it takes resources to do this. If we graduated somebody from high school, and if somebody is doing electrical and or mechanics or carpentry or plumbing, and they get an A, but we don't use A, I don't know what our leveling system is that they use.
The House will suspend until 2 p.m.